So whenever I say an artist's opinion doesn't matter on their art, it's because whenever an artist says this is worth $50 to me and somebody else says no, it's not, the artist can still try to charge $50 for it, but nobody has to buy it because that value is decided by the customer.
Hey, internets. So this is an extra spicy video because this is going to be on one of those topics that tends to generate a little bit of butthurt due to the brutally honest mixture of red pilling that I am about to throw down. You see, the thing is, a lot of economic concepts, as it turns out, are in fact really easy to understand. So easy that a kid could get it. The problem though, and the reason why you see so much disagreement in the field of economics, is often down to a very simple but also very annoying concept known as intellectual honesty. Now, intellectual honesty is best understood as being willing to accept fact that what is true is not always the same thing as what you feel to be true or want to be true. It's the acceptance of the reality that there is often a disconnect there. Things aren't always going to be what you want them to be. You have to instead care about what is true, and you need to be only interested in figuring out the truth. And you have to be willing to accept it when you see it. And so thus, when you're met with evidence, either empirical or logical or rational or whatever, that overwhelmingly refutes what one feels to be true, an intellectually honest person will accept that truth. Because when you are being intellectually honest, the objective truth is all one ultimately cares about, and that is what their mind is set on figuring out, a mind that is firmly rooted in honest reasoning. However, an intellectually dishonest person cares a bit about more so their truth, and their mind can be better described as a rationalization hamster. And that's what you have. You have intellectually honest people based on reasoning, searching out the truth, and then you have people with the rationalization hamster searching out evidence that meets their truth. The more reality contradicts what the intellectually dishonest person wants to be true, the faster the hamster has to spin in that wheel, in order to come up with smart sounding but ultimately ridiculous and logically fallacious reasons for why their truth is somehow the truth when it is not. However, it's important to also understand that none of us are perfect here. All human beings are subject to at least some degree of the rationalization hamster, just some significantly more than others. And trust me on this, as someone who has studied hypnosis, I know this very well. The mind will do some very weird things when what it expects to experience does not line up with what is actually going on around it. So there is somewhat of a gray area here. The difference, though, is which side of our mind is more in control. Do you have a small hamster that you are aware of and you keep fully in check, or is that hamster a big boy that has fully asserted his dominance? That's the main difference between an intellectually honest and intellectually dishonest person. Because if that hamster is a big boy and he's asserted his dominance, you can't tell the difference between these two things anymore. And so people who don't have this under control are going to end up coming up with some really insane arguments in order to pretend that their feels are reals. And the more ridiculous those arguments get, the faster the hamster has to spin its wheel. The more quickly come up with more rationalizations and justifications for why its nonsensical beliefs are correct. And while the subject of intellectual honesty is relevant to basically everything that deals with truth in any meaningful sense, this is a problem that especially comes up with the field of economics. And for a very straightforward reason, which is that economics deals with scarcity. Oh no. And scarcity tends to generate a lot of hurt feelings because everyone wants stuff and everyone feels like they should have stuff because they want stuff, and yet there is not enough stuff to go around, and that's not always fair. And because it's not fair, the feelings almonds in the minds of the intellectually dishonest people whose hamsters have taken full dominance become perpetually activated. And the result of this is that a lot of the disagreements in the field of economics are not actually true disagreements at all. I mean, they are technically true disagreements, they're just not disagreements that you should actually be taking seriously, because it's not coming from people who are thinking logically, it's coming from people who, well, the hamster's in control. But the harsh reality is, when the intellectual dishonesty is removed, a lot of these economic concepts are, again, insanely easy to get. I'll just be using the subjective theory of value as an example. This theory is not quantum physics, it does not require completion of Math 55 to get. In fact, even a child can grasp it, and I will prove it to you right now by explaining it in a way that even a third grader can understand. For instance, let's say that Reimu here is tired of her other work, and has decided to open up a pineapple farm. We're not going to ask how she got the money, doesn't really matter. And to keep things simple, it's not really a big farm, it just has pineapples, doesn't really do anything else, doesn't really grow anything else. And to keep things even more simple, we'll just say that she's hired exactly one other local girl in order to help her out in the whole process of growing and then selling pineapples. But of course, here comes the tricky part. What do they sell the pineapples for? How much are the pineapples worth? Does Reimu get to say, well, hey, I've put a lot of time and effort and money into these pineapples, so I'm just going to sell them for $100? Yep, that's right, $100 a pop because I say so. And then nobody buys the pineapples. And why did nobody buy her pineapples? Well, it's pretty simple, because none of her potential customers at the farmer's market were willing to pay $100 for one freaking pineapple. This is because at the end of the day, the value is subjective. And what is it subjective to? The desires of man, which means that these goods are only worth what people are willing to pay for them. You don't just get to say that it's worth X amount of money. I mean, well, you can technically. It doesn't guarantee that anyone will buy it for that price. Saying that you're going to sell a pineapple for $100, $1,000 or whatever, that's not going to magically manifest someone to come and give you $100 for your pineapple. It just doesn't work that way. What happens instead is you have to find out what people are willing to pay for it. Some people are going to really like pineapples, and they may even be willing to pay $10, $15 for a pineapple. Some people don't like pineapples at all, and they won't buy it no matter what. They'll view it as trash, they don't even want it, and they don't even want to deal with the hassle of reselling it. And once you've evaluated a lot of customer needs and wants, what you're going to find, once you average things out and do some math, is that there's going to be a general price where you can sell these pineapples and most people will buy them, and you'll still make some kind of decent profit. And that price is going to be based entirely on the subjective demand for pineapples. That demand may be higher on some days, and it might be lower on some other days. Or in other words, sometimes people will really want pineapples and sometimes they won't, because that's just how people are. We have subjective desires, we sometimes want things, and we sometimes don't want things. Congratulations, we've just organically discovered the link between economics and basic human psychology. Amazing. And we've also discovered why the supply and demand curve is often used to determine what the price of a good is going to be. And thus, Reimu is going to find a sweet spot where she can price her pineapples in a way that she's not giving them away for free, but also not just letting them rot at the farmer's stand. And at the end of the day, that price is going to be based on the fact that there is some kind of subjective demand for it. And we can very, very easily prove this with some really basic reasoning skills. For instance, let's pretend that one day everyone decides that they hate pineapples. For whatever strange reason, nobody's interested in pineapples from this day forward. Nobody wants to buy them, nobody wants to eat them. So now with the demand part of this curve taken away, what is the price of pineapples? Well, now that nobody values pineapples anymore, and the subjective valuation is thus completely gone, this graph ceases to make any sense, because the pineapples have no value. It drops to zero. Or in other words, if nobody wants to buy something, then that something's value is zero. It does not matter how much work and how much investment Reimu put into her pineapple farm. If nobody wants to buy her pineapples anymore, tough cookies. You can pump that supply and claim it's worth whatever, as much as you want. If the demand isn't there, too bad. Value does not come from her hired help either. The value of her labor, interestingly enough, is also based on the supply and demand curve when it comes to selling your labor. And since pineapples aren't worth anything anymore, well, that unfortunately means that poor Reimu now has to close down her pineapple farm. And now her helper is going to have to find somewhere else to work because, again, the profits aren't coming from some surplus labor value like a communist or a socialist would tell you. Her profits are ultimately dependent on her employer being able to pay her, which requires the business to be producing something that people are, again, actually willing to buy, and since people aren't willing to buy pineapples anymore in this hypothetical world, well, it's time to find another thing to do. TLDR, extremely oversimplified, mankind's desires are subjective, and thus man is only willing to trade for things that he actually wants. Things do not just magically have value on their own. For example, imagine if the universe was completely devoid of life. Every single planet in the universe is just an empty, barren world. What purpose does this universe have? What value does this universe have? Well, assuming that you can't somehow slip into this universe and steal its resources, and then sell it in a universe where life actually does exist, the value of this isolated, lifeless world is, well, zero, because value ultimately comes from those of us with a conscious will to give things value. Without living, thinking things to ponder and decide what they want and what they don't want, it doesn't really matter what this hypothetical, lifeless universe has in it, does it? And for all we know, this hypothetical universe could actually exist in an alternative dimension somewhere, but it ultimately doesn't matter. There's no one to give it purpose, so it has no purpose, because purpose is actually just an immaterial concept invented by thinking, living beings. And without that, the entire universe might as well just melt into nothingness, because no one would be around to know the difference. And this is all, again, pretty easy to figure out. If no one's willing to buy your pineapple, you're not really going to be selling it for $1,000 or whatever. Again, a child can understand this. And yet, there is still a debate. And why is that? Well, because often the business owner ends up making more money than the laborer does. And that's not equality. That's not fair. That feels bad. Almonds activated. Error, NPC script, critical fault. Truth is not aligning with my truth. Hamster wheel online. And thus you get communists defending the labor theory of value instead. claiming that all profit is theft, even though hilariously enough, once you realize where the value is actually coming from, you realize that without any kind of profit, the laborer wouldn't be able to work there either because there would be no incentive for the business to even exist. But here's the fun thing, here's the kicker, it doesn't matter, because the hamster has decided so. The hamster spins and the rationalizations begin. And so that's why you see what you would normally expect to be pretty educated, relatively not dim-witted people coming up with really, really silly arguments to defend the labor theory of value. For instance, I saw a debate between Liquid Zulu and President Sunday and some guys on his server, and one of the arguments I saw in favor of the labor theory of value was this amazing little gem that the labor theory of value is true because the difference between the value of the goods produced by the laborer and what they get paid can be empirically measured. Wow, amazing, I totally didn't know that. Therefore, the theory is correct. It doesn't matter that the business owner is the one taking on the risk of the fact that the value of said goods can change at any time because it's subjective, and thus the profits are actually being generated by producing goods that people are willing to pay for at a cost that is higher than it takes to produce them. It doesn't matter that the laborer itself is also subject to the same supply and demand curve. They can empirically measure that difference. Therefore, must surplus labor value is true. You know, kind of like how the moon is in fact a divine being. Yes, really, the moon is God. How do I know that the moon is divine? How do I know that it's God? Well, it's simple really, because you can empirically measure the radius of the moon. And because that can be empirically measured, it must be divine. Brilliant. I can empirically measure something, therefore my assumptions about what that measurement means are correct. And I know this because I can empirically measure it. Therefore, my assumptions about what that measurement means are correct. And how do I know this? Well, because I can empirically measure it. Therefore, my assumptions about what the measurement means are correct. And how do I know that? Well, of course, because I can empirically measure it. And therefore, my assumptions about what that measurement means are correct. And round that hamster wheel goes. Where does it stop? Nobody knows. Yeah, really, it's legit just a stupid circular argument. And that's how the rationalization hamster works. The logic of their argument becomes obviously insane when compared to something like claiming the moon is magic, because we can then see it, therefore magic exists because we can see the moon, round and round, etc., etc. But the hamster doesn't care. The hamster has one goal, and that is to come up with arguments that don't immediately sound wrong, at least to the mind from which the hamster came from. So long as you don't think about it too hard, the claim that the labor theory of value is correct because you can empirically measure the difference between what a laborer earns and the value of the goods they produce, that just might sound like a good argument. It's of course not, and I just explained why it's not, but to the hamster hijacked mind, it can absolutely get a pass. So this disagreement on how value works is not really a genuine disagreement, and the concept of the subjective theory of value is really easy for people to grasp. And as for that disagreement, well, it's more or less just a battle of wit between those of us who have acknowledged the reality that yes, equality is not a real thing all the time, and those who allow the hamster to run the show. And you can really see this if you go back in time and watch videos like the one from the Gravel Institute, which support the labor theory of value, and try to sell you the idea that profit is theft. That's designed to elicit your emotions. Oh no, you've been stolen from. It's very blatantly designed to appeal to the audience's emotions. Oh no, the business owner usually makes money off his investment, which means the laborer isn't getting the full value of what people are willing to pay for the goods he produces. Never mind the fact that this completely ignores all the other thousands of factors and overhead costs. The owner is making more money than the little guy, and that's not fair. That's not equality. That hurts my feelings. 3, 2, 1, sleep, little leftoid, deepest and most amazing, most relaxing sleep you ever had. Let all your troubles and fears melt away in the relaxation. No need to worry anymore because your rationalization hamster is running the show now, and it's time for your brain to generate another 10,000 mental gymnastics in order to justify the feel-goodism belief that equality feels nice, therefore equality real. Yeah. And that's the sad truth about the debate between the labor theory of value and the subjective value. It's really not a serious thing. It's just that because it's tied to my equality and my fairness, it automatically becomes a touchy subject. Hurt feelings, almonds activated, hamster wheel online. And here's the thing a lot of people might not realize. Intellectual honesty isn't always tied to true intellectual ability. There is some correlation there on the G factor, but it's not always the case. There are plenty of well-educated people on the triple-digit side of the G factor who are unfortunately under total hamster control. And that's why this is such an important topic. It seems like a silly topic, but the reality is it's very easy for an intellectually dishonest person to generate smart-sounding reasons for believing in really stupid things, because of the true reason, which is usually just my feelings. This is what I meant in that recent quote tweet towards Fabian Liberty, which not everybody may have noticed. That the subjective theory of value is somewhat of a litmus test. It's to see if a person's able to accept an unwanted truth, or if there's just a pseudo-intellectual who hamsterizes for what they want to be true. true. Does Asmongold understand economics better than a lot of econ professors? Well, interesting enough, where it comes to having to understand where value comes from in the context of not really caring about my feelings, yes. Because again, a lot of these economic concepts don't actually require you to be that smart in order to get them. You just have to be honest. You just have to be one of those people who knows how to keep the hamster under control. Asmongold probably isn't an expert in economics in any academic or credentialed sense. But the thing is, for a lot of these concepts, this isn't what matters most. You don't actually need to be that smart or educated to understand that value is based on what customers are willing to pay. You just need to be honest and call it like you see it. Or in other words, you just need to make sure that you're the one at the decision-making desk, not the hamster. The hamster is a tempting little guy. The hamster will tell you what you want to hear, and he'll provide your mind reasons that sound just smart enough that you might not notice that they're BS if you just decide to go along with it and not run a recheck. Anyways, that's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, subscribe, leave a comment, or if you really liked it, leave a tip on my Ko-Fi. I did get a question I saw from somebody about asking whether or not I was going to keep making more long-form, high-effort videos that aren't just game rants. The answer to that is yes, and I'm actually pushing to get one done that I've been lightly procrastinating on a little bit, but I'm going to push to get it done within the first half of February. But yeah, again, that is it for this video. Thanks for watching. Till next time.